Chairperson Neil Hamilton.
On the 13th of February this year, Cabinet Secretary said that the vacant land tax is to have an impact on behaviour rather than to raise revenue. In the Republic of Ireland, the tax barely covers the cost of collection, so this is something which has got to be borne in mind. I wonder to what extent the Cabinet Secretary is able to say that land banking is a real problem in Wales rather than just a perception. Because Laura Harry, a planning consultant from Barton Wilmore, independent planning and design consultancy, says that whilst in theory a vacant land tax intended to increase house building, it may have the opposite effect and make Wales less attractive to house builders, undermine the Welsh Government's housing ambitions, which is something obviously which the Cabinet Secretary would not wish to see. So is this tax perhaps directed at a problem which is more illusory than real?
Well, I don't believe that to be the case. I think there is evidence of land banking happening in some parts of Wales, and I've pointed in the Chamber previously to our stalled sites fund that shows over 400 sites in Wales unable to be brought forward to be put to productive use because there is remediation work or the need to provide services for that land, and that means that land is not in productive use, and our stalled sites fund with £40 million of Welsh Government investment available for it is designed to help to remedy that situation. And I think it's very important for me to point out that the purpose of a vacant land tax is not to penalise anybody who is doing their very best to bring land into productive use, but it is to provide an additional incentive to those people who simply sit on land, hoping that the work that the public has done in providing them with planning permissions and so on will just lead to rising land values, and having done nothing at all themselves, they will be able to cash in on that by selling land in future. The process, however, Llywyd, is really important because at this stage we are at the very start of this process, and many of the questions that the member raises and other detailed questions will be part of the work that we will want to do once we know that the power has been transferred to us to bring this idea further forward.
Yes. I fully accept what the Finance Secretary says there, but obviously if we are going to have such a tax, we do need to realise that the behavioural effects which it might bring about can also be in the opposite direction, a point to which I'll come in a minute. And although this is generally thought of as a problem to be addressed in urban areas, there is a potential impact on rural areas too. A rural surveyor for CLA Cymru, Charles de Winton, says that small rural plots may not be viable to develop, and a tax which forces them into development will inevitably increase the cost of development, a cost which will be passed on to the end user. This doesn't help us tackle the crisis of availability of rural homes. And the CLA's research in Wales suggests that over a third of the 1.3 billion annually into the economy by rural land is already put into residential development. One of the big problems with development sites is, of course, planning permission and the delays which sometimes that can bring about. So potential developers often find themselves unwillingly in a situation where they are sitting on vacant land. And we know around us here in Cardiff Bay there are lots of what might appear to be prime sites which still remain to be developed because there are no buyers for one reason or another. So this is a matter which must be dealt with as sensitively and with some delicacy.
So all the points the member makes are important points, and ones that we would wish to take seriously. And no finance minister, when the detailed work is done, should that work demonstrate that a potential tax would create more problems than it would solve, nobody would want to take it further forward. So these are important points and ones we will definitely want to consider. I recognise the point the member makes about rural communities and the fact that development often takes longer for specific reasons. But I just repeat the point I made to him in the very beginning, that a vacant land tax is not intended to bear down on those people who are making every effort to bring land into productive use. And you've got to design it in a way that makes sure that people who are doing everything they can are not captured by it, while providing an additional incentive for those people, and we do believe that, that this does exist in the Welsh economy, just as the Chancellor of the Exchequer was anxious that it existed in the London economy, where people who should be bringing land forward for productive use choose not to do it in order simply to speculate for a windfall gain.
To another tax now to explore the impact on behaviour. We're seeing this in the case of the sugar tax imposed now by the Westminster government. The Welsh government is due to get £47 million in extra funding over 2 years because of spending in England linked to that. Forecasts for what the levy would raise have fallen from 520 million to 240 million. Now, the behavioural changes which the sugar tax has brought about already are that Coca-Cola, for example, have reduced the size of their standard regular Coke cans from 330 ml to 250, although that hasn't led to a similar reduction in price in many cases. So now we could find ourselves in a situation where instead of buying a third of a litre in a can, people are buying 2 cans a quarter of a litre, so they're buying actually more sugary drink than before at a higher price. So this would be a perverse outcome for such a tax to bring about. But Wales has a significant problem with obesity, worse than any other part of the UK. 59% of adults apparently overweight, I'm probably one of them, and 23% classed as obese. As to the allocation of the money which is raised, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether the Welsh Government is going to allocate this money to solve the problem of obesity predominantly, whilst not regarding it as a wholly hypothecated tax? If it is raised for a purpose of changing behaviour, then the money which is going to be spent from that revenue should be directed towards the problem which it's intended to solve.
Well, I begin by welcoming the fact that manufacturers have taken action to reduce sugar content in their products and to reformulate the way in which products are brought to market in order to have a bearing on obesity. I regret the fact that the sugar tax was simply announced in a budget without any reference to the devolved administrations, despite the fact that it has a direct bearing on our responsibilities, and therefore we weren't able to contribute to a debate which may have pointed to some of the potential unintended consequences of the tax as it currently stands. Money has been transferred to the Welsh budget as a result of it. It will partly help to take forward initiatives such as the Preventable Obesity Programme that my colleague Vaughan Gethin is undertaking, but it allows us to do other things as well. It allows us to support the programme of free healthy breakfasts in our primary schools. It helps us to introduce the new school holiday enrichment programme, which helps to feed children during the school holidays who otherwise might go hungry, and it allows us to do a number of other things in the field that the member mentioned to help us to bear down on the problems of obesity, which are well known and well recognised.